Hello, my name is Chris Hayes, and this is my language milestone application 1. Okay, so for the first milestones I found was age 0 to 2. The first milestone was vocalization limited to crying for discomfort. That's kind of in the 0 to 3 month range. Then babies will begin to use play and gain more control over vocal sounds because they are developing the necessary muscle structure. They're also putting vowels and consonants together to make non-speech sounds. It's in that 4 to 6 month range. Babbling begins in the next range. Babbling is the repeating of a syllable. They should be able to make multiple sounds in one breath. Babies who do not use babble should be seen by a speech pathologist. That's in that 6 to 11 month range, and that was what was recommended by the website that I found this information on. During the next stage, jargon and the first words will appear in the child. Speech may contain adult-like speech patterns. That's in the 12 to 18 month range. And then speech will begin to develop rapidly. Distortions of sound are not typical, and children with different sound productions should be evaluated. For example, if a child appears to be snorting sounds, or if sound quality is overly slushy or hoarse, these are red flags of a possible speech disorder. By the age of 3, the child should be easily understood by most listeners, including strangers. My wife just had a baby sister. She is currently 6 months old. I do recall her going through the first 2 stages, which is, looking back on, kind of interesting. I do recall when she was born and they gave her a first bath, for example, she began to cry, showing that discomfort. Now she's currently kind of using the vowel and consonant sounds. I've heard her make the ah sound and ba. So she's kind of combining the vowel A with consonants right now. It's kind of what she's doing. She's not quite to the babbling stage yet, so I think she's still with the stage where she's playing, gaining more accent or more control over her vocal sounds, and still developing that necessary muscle structure. Hey, in this video that I found, it shows the progress of the first milestones of language in infants, from babble to their first words. It was kind of interesting to look for this because it's kind of what the next stages of her little sister's going to be. So kind of watching this gave me some ideas of what those next steps are and like what I would look for when I would see her next. So it would be kind of interesting to see this progress. Okay, so the next milestones are the 3 to 6 years. By age 4, children should be using more difficult sounds such as the th and l. The child should be able to communicate with extended family members, peers, and teachers. If the child is frustrated or has difficulty communicating, then they should be recommended to see a speech pathologist. Students should be able to follow directions that require paying attention to multi-step information. The student should be using sentences of 5 or more words. The student should be asking questions frequently, and by age 5, students should be saying around 9,000 to 2,000 words while understanding around 10,000. The student should also begin to draw letters and listen to books and answer simple questions. My wife also has a sister who is 6 years old, so she'll be going into the 1st grade. While she was in kindergarten, I know that she was already reading at a 1st grade level, so I felt like she was kind of ahead of all of these stages, or all of these milestones. I feel like she's already in that 7 to 12 range. She currently has adult-like conversations. I feel like her vocabulary is probably more than that 900 to 2,000. Just very intelligent for her age currently, and I feel like she's ahead of most all of these steps. Okay, so the next videos that I found 2 videos. The first video interviews a speech pathologist about interventions for a 3-year-old. So this was kind of interesting because I've never worked with children this young. I am certified for language arts in the middle school. I also have a reading endorsement. However, the youngest students I've worked with have been in that second grade. So seeing these interventions for a child so young was kind of interesting to see how kind of the family service plan would look like if a child was on one. And then the following video is a conversation with a 3-year-old with apraxia of speech. I have no experience with children with this, so this was rather interesting as well to see what a child with apraxia, how they interact with somebody else and how they communicate. So the next milestones are the 7 to 12 range. When entering first grade, students should be able to listen and understand age-appropriate text. They should be able to recognize and provide rhyming words. The students should also be able to print their name. Red flags would be speech is difficult to understand, if the student has trouble retelling an age-appropriate story, or if the student has difficulties following instructions. These could lead to being recommended to see the speech and language pathologist. By 8, they should be able to follow complex directions without repetition, uses compound and complex sentences, and carries on adult-like conversations. Students should be able to read and write. Students will be able to think in concrete terms as vocabulary continues to grow. And this age group will typically be the first grade all the way up into the 6th grade. So I have dealt a little bit with this age group because I've dealt with that 10 to 12-year-old range. Kind of saw what it looks like when these children have reading difficulties. Not too much in the necessarily their articulation. I've had one student that I recall had difficulty articulating his the R sound, which I think that's a difficult sound to make. I think a lot of students tend to have difficulties with it, but he saw our speech and language pathologist, and by this age, she did some articulation work with him. However, majority of it was kind of talking with me and asking me what was going on in the classroom so she could help kind of his comprehension skills, which at first I didn't realize that that's what a speech and language pathologist would do. I kind of thought all they did was kind of help students with the sounds, because when I was younger in that 1st to 2nd grade, I saw a speech and language pathologist to help with the S sound. So I kind of thought, at least in my opinion, that's what they did. So I found out something new with that last year. So that was fun and interesting. The next video interviews 2 speech and language pathologists that talk about interventions for students from 18 months to school-age children. Like, once again, this is kind of a little bit on the lower age group. However, it was good from what I found for that 7+, kind of dealing with that 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade range, which was nice to see. And then the last milestone, 12 to 18-year-olds. Students will be able to understand advanced levels of communication. Students may respond with monosyllable answers. Students will have a high level of comprehension and vocabulary. This is what I have more experience with, dealing with these students who are dramatically behind. So my students were oftentimes unable to understand advanced levels of communication, and they did not have that high level of comprehension of vocabulary. Oftentimes they were 2 or more reading comprehension grade levels behind, so they often also struggled with figurative meanings, so they needed concrete evidence for them to really grasp. So it was kind of difficult to teach those abstract ideas to these students that I had. And the final video talks about reading interventions for middle school age children. The author of this video uses 7 habits of good readers for her students. She kind of has a chart that she goes with and helps them out with it. Thought that was really interesting. If I was going to be doing language arts again, I think that this would be something that I would try and look at and possibly implement some kind of version of this. However, my upcoming year I'll be an intervention specialist, so I think this could be something good to help my 7th and 8th graders, especially the struggling readers, with kind of look at this and break it down for them a little bit and kind of help them. So, and that's all I have for the application 1. Thank you.